Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrive by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 189, we sit down with Dr. Manfred Stapff, physician, researcher, and author of Real-World Evidence Unveiled. Born and raised in Germany, Dr. Manfred Stapff's career has taken him from serving as flight surgeon in the German Air Force to working with major pharmaceutical companies like Merck and Forest Laboratories, and later as chief medical officer at TriNetX, where he helped shape how real-world data is used in modern medicine. Now based in Greenport, Dr. Stapff continues to advise healthcare organizations and pharmaceutical companies through his firm Candid-Advisory Inc. and remains a leading voice in how data and evidence can improve the ways we understand health and treatment. In our conversation, we talk about his early life and education in Munich, his transition from military to medical research, the evolution of clinical trials and real-world evidence, and his insights into the U.S. healthcare system and pharmaceutical industry. We also discuss his new book and his reflections on the North Fork. So I hope you enjoy episode 189 with Dr. Manfred Stapff. This episode was recorded July 21st, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
Thank you very much for having me. Wonderful library and wonderful podcast studio.
Thank you. And Dr. Stapff, can you start off in the beginning with your childhood and growing up in Germany, and where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I was born and raised in southern Bavaria, a small town between Munich and Salzburg. Munich, I think people know Salzburg is a town in Austria, and it's called Rosenheim. Spent my childhood there and grew up in the 60s. If you know, the 60s were the time or the decade of the moon landing, the Apollo program. So every little kid wanted to be an astronaut. There was nothing else astronaut. In addition, the town of Rosenheim had a very famous ice hockey team. At that time, the winters were still cold. The lakes were always frozen. We played the whole winter ice hockey on the lakes, or even created our own rink in the garden, just with the water hose, and played ice hockey. So ice hockey and astronaut were the childhood dreams. I still remember when Apollo 8 flew to the moon the first time. It was Christmas Eve. So we were playing on Christmas Eve ice hockey. I just can remember because my brother told me, and do you know they're going to the moon today? And I said, to the moon? Will there be landing? And then he said, no, they just circle around. They just test it. I just can remember that because it was during our ice hockey game on a frozen lake. And then I said, okay, it's time for us to go home. It was time for us to go home to watch TV, the Apollo, but not because it was Christmas Eve. So this was the focus of my interest there.
Wow. And does your family's history go far back in that region of Bavaria?
Yes, from my mother's side, my grandfather from my mother's side, and since it's my mother's side, the name is a different one than, of course, but the name is Klepper, a relatively well-known name in this town because it was a company, and my grandfather invented the foldable kayak. He copied this principle from the Inuit. They use whale bones as a skeleton for their boat, and then whale skin, put it over the skeleton, and they have a relatively nice and stable kayak. He used good Bavarian wood from the forests in Bavaria. And he also found a way how to vulcanize linen or leather or other kind of material and make it watertight. So for that, he produced the skin over the kayak and the raincoat, which is still a kind of a saying in Germany: there is no bad weather, there is just bad clothing, because you don't have a good raincoat. The company went through the son's line, so not through the women's line. That's why my name is, of course, not the name Klepper, and I have nothing to do with the company. But of course, with that tradition, I would say I still have, how much is it, 1/16 of his DNA in my body. Then I have to have a foldable kayak. It's still available today for outdoor enthusiasts and also for the military, because you can easily dismantle it and transport it on a backpack. And it's very stable and has a lot of space. So if you see me kayaking in Sterling Harbor with a weird-looking kayak, this may actually be me.
Nice. And then, so what about your parents? What did they do for work?
My parents were teachers. So if you grow up as a kid of teachers, so like many kids, you have to respect authority. You have to respect what parents say, because they are teacher. They are supposed to know everything better. And also we enjoyed a lot of vacation, because teachers have the vacation as the students have. So for a family life, it was relatively comfortable to have teachers as parents or parents as teachers.
Yes. And you mentioned this was like post-war Munich. How was that? As a child, probably growing up, you were more you said in the suburbs?
You could call it suburbs.
Okay.
Definitely not big city. Definitely not Munich. It was a town called Rosenheim with, at that time, about 30,000 residents. So not a small village, but still more suburban climate. And Bavarian, relatively conservative, 90% Catholic. And then still, the war was just 15, 20 years ago, so still some turmoil, still some recovery from everything what happened. Especially elderly teachers came from that time. My parents were just teenagers at that time, so they were not too much influenced, but of course they lived through the horrors of the war. They lived through the horrors of the Nazi regime, and in the 60s, where I grew up as a kid, one did not really know how to deal with it, to be honest. Now Germany has a better approach to their history, but in the 60s was a little bit difficult how to handle it.
Yes. And so before we get to your university times, just going through, I don't know if they'd call it high school, or I was going to say gym.
It's what you call here in the US a fitness center, gymnasium.
Yes.
For us, this gymnasium is the high school. Yes, from 5th grade to, at that time, 13th grade. That's this was our high school, which what we call Abitur, in French baccalaureate. It's basically a kind of an examen which allows you to go to the university. And here I think you call university if it's connected with research, otherwise it would be college, wouldn't it? Would it be? Yeah. So, yeah, and in Germany we called it university.
Okay. And then in terms of even the education at that time through high school, is it pretty in terms of what path you wanted to go, even starting in high school and into college? Did you know what you wanted to do coming out of high school?
I knew a little bit the tendencies. A few moments ago was talking about the Apollo program, the moon landing. So science and all these kind of technical issues interested me very much. So during high school, I was less interested in, let's say, German literature or history, which my parents really did not like that because they were teachers of history and German literature. So I went the other direction. I went more into the scientific part, construction, engineering, physics, mathematics, biology. These were the areas where I was very much interested in, and less in languages or literature.
Yes. And so you studied medicine and diagnostic ultrasound at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. How did your time at the university shape your career path and interest in medical research?
Yeah, so I eventually decided for medicine and not so much for physics or chemistry or mathematics. Because at that time, remember, this is the area or the time of what we call today the boomers. Many students, many young people, and also many people who wanted to study medicine. So the access to the university was regulated. You had to have a specific grade in your exam after high school, and I managed to have that. So at that time, if you actually were accepted by the university and had the good grades to study medicine, you did it. If you did not, if you followed your interest and said, no, I'm rather doing mathematics or physics or so, then people would say, you idiot, you can study medicine because you have the grade, so do it. There is some truth behind it because medicine is a basis for all other sciences. Medicine is the biology and the science of the human body. So you do not necessarily have to become a doctor and treat patients. You get a lot of a basic knowledge, at least at that time, about science, biochemistry, biology, and so on. Like also, if you study law, you do not necessarily have to become a lawyer. You get a lot of a basis for later for economy or for other professions which you can choose. So despite I thought I'm perhaps not the perfect physician in terms of social skill and compassion and caring about sick people, this is what you should have as a physician. I was more interested in the scientific aspect of medicine. And that's why I then chose it and went through it. And since there were so many students in medical school or in university, most of the courses were theoretical, not practical. The examens were theoretical, meaning multiple choice questions, no practical questions. There was a lot of criticism going on at that time. How do we educate our physicians? Do they ever learn to deal with a patient, to have communication skills, to have social skills, to feel what patients feel? You cannot learn that in a theoretical course. You cannot test that in a multiple choice test. But this was the time at that time. There was a lot of criticism. There were many voices who requested for a change in the way how Germany educates their physicians. But at that time, that's what the universities could handle. But it somehow, it matched my interests. My interests were more in science, more in theory, more in biology and physics and biochemistry, not so much I could not so much imagine that I would spend my life as a caring physician in a hospital with very, very sick cases. I knew that at that time already. But I did, at least for a few years, because I had to learn and also get the expertise what is really caring for patients, prescribing medicine, watching for side effects, making a diagnosis, listen to the patient. Retrospectively, I say it really helped me a lot to see the big picture in medicine. Was definitely a huge benefit that I did this. How much was it? 5 or 6 years of practical medicine.
Yes. And so you've had experience as a flight surgeon in the German Air Force. Can you share a little bit about that experience through your career?
Yeah, this was my very first job, so to say, after medical school as a young, unexperienced, but ready licensed physician. And you can imagine if you do that in the Air Force, then all the soldiers, all the pilots, they want to test you. They make fun of you. They bully you a little bit. So this is also an experience where I had to go through. One has to consider that at that time Germany had a draft army. So every abled young man, only men, 18 or older, had to go for a certain period of time into the army. The United States does not have that. I think Israel has it. Other countries also have a draft system. At that time, one considered that is the best system because it also educates young men in behavior. They learn also some other things. They also it also allows that almost everybody, at least the men, have been part of the German army, and helps also to integrate the military a little bit better with the regular society, because almost everybody has been there. Everybody spent a few months or a year in the army. So the integration and the understanding of the population for their military was really improved. So this was at that time. Of course, all young men tried to escape. They invented some diseases. They got a friendly physician who wrote some kind of a letter. Oh, this young man cannot go to the army, or you try to escape. Some people changed their residency to Berlin. Berlin at that time was demilitarized, was parted in East and West Germany, and there couldn't be any kind of military equipments there. So if you changed your residency into Berlin, you did not have to go to the army. So it's just to summarize a few tricks how to escape that. In my case, I told them that I will study medicine, so they waited until I was ready with my medical examen and with my medical license, and then they got me. So that's why I started as a 23, 24-year-old young physician in the Air Force. Was really a very interesting time. I really enjoyed it. Of course, not the military part, considering that what we are doing was to potentially defend West Germany against East Germany, meaning so the weapon you got could theoretically be used in case of a war against our friends and brothers and sisters in East Germany. Horrible thought. But if you put that aside, it was very interesting. I could co-pilot, fly fighter jets. I had search and rescue tasks with the helicopter. Of course, when you come to a crashed airplane, of course, you are immediately theoretically horrified what you may find. But fortunately, in the cases where I went through a jet crash, the pilots could escape with the ejection seat, and then ejection seat escape can have some injuries on the neck, on the back, or other type of bones, but they survived it very well. And other emergency landings just caused some bruises, no big problems. So fortunately, from a medical point of view, I was not really tested because, again, this was my first job as a young physician with a very theoretical training in the university. So you are a little bit nervous, you're a little bit stressed if you hear the alarm and you have to go to the runway because perhaps emergency landing is going on because the jet lost all the hydraulics or whatever happens. Extremely exciting time for someone who grew up in the 60s with moon landing and Apollo program. Again, it's airplanes, it's technology, it's adventure.
And where were you based within the Air Force?
This was an airport between, if you know a little bit about the German geography, again in Bavaria, between Munich and Nuremberg. Not a civil airport, military, pure military airport, one of the largest. Now you know a little bit more the name Ramstein. Most likely that's where the Americans basically have their biggest, largest base for all kind of activities in Europe and in the Near East. At that time, where I was stationed very close to a city called Ingolstadt, where, by the way, the car Audi is produced, at that time was one of the biggest NATO airports at that time. Was also interesting because I did not only do the regular job as a physician, meaning being family physician for the pilots and emergency physician for accidents and all this kind of stuff. We did also a little bit of research, was called ergonomy, meaning how to design an aircraft cockpit so that the human can in the best way interact with the technology. Simple questions, for example, should an instrument be analog, like an analog watch, for example, or should an instrument be digital and show the digital numbers? Which of the instruments requires more effort by the brain, and which of the instruments allows the brain to digest the information quicker and faster? Much easier task were, for example, just to just to adjust the cockpit size to the growing size of the pilots. Every generation, the younger generation, is a little bit taller than the generation before. So if you have airplanes which were constructed in the 1950s, in the 1970s or 1980s, the cockpit may be quite small for such a big person. So these were things. Then also, how can we protect the backbone, especially the lumbar part of the backbone of helicopter pilots? Because of the vibrations, they are more prone to get lower back pain because the vibrations impact the vertebrae of the lower backbone. So again, something very, very exciting. Also science in addition to pure medicine. If we still have some time, we have an interesting story also. One of the emergency situations where we were alarmed out to the runway, a jet is landing without any hydraulics and it may end up in a disaster. And then what was the jet? This was also a testing airport where they tested all types of aircraft for their performance. And of course, as a NATO member, you had also to test the airplanes of the Warsaw Pact, meaning the Soviet Union. So you know what your enemy airplane can do. But where do you get these enemy aircrafts from? So this plane with the emergency, with the Mayday, Mayday, Mayday call, was a Russian MiG. And you can imagine everything is in Cyrillic and in Russian. So there's no instruction manual. Perhaps someone can understand it. But how to get it? It came from Egypt in parts. So that's how the German Air Force was able to get a Russian MiG. Got it in parts from Egypt, built it together, put it together. And apparently somehow it did not really work well with the hydraulics, so had to make an emergency landing. So these were the kind of stories which made this time in the German Air Force quite enjoyable. I really liked it. Again, if you put the politics totally aside, put it aside that there was the Soviet Union, there was a border where people have been killed by automatic shooting weapons. If you just cross the border, you get shot. If you have to put that aside at that time.
Yes.
Because otherwise you would go nuts. Many people went nuts, honestly. And fortunately, the wall fell and the Soviet Union dismantled or dissolved in the late 1980s.
Yes. And I was just curious, during that time, did you get to go up to Berlin at all at that point, even before the wall came down?
It was not easy to go to Berlin. So I mentioned earlier, if someone wanted to escape the army, they moved to Berlin. It was possible. There were 2 corridors or 3 corridors actually where you could drive through East Germany to West Berlin. Flying was a little bit more difficult. Only I think British Airways were allowed to fly into West Berlin. Lufthansa, for example, or German airline was not allowed to fly into West Berlin. So it was possible. I think 1 or 2 train routes were also there. I did not go, but when I then later joined, after my time in the university clinic as a practicing physician in the 1990s, when I joined the pharmaceutical industry for research, we also had research sites in East Germany. So this was already after the reunification, but very, very shortly after reunification. Everything was still East Germany. The money was East Germany. The people were East Germany. The borders were still there, and one had to make sure that one uses the official border crossing because, other border crossings were automatically shooting equipment. So you really had to be where you are supposed to be. And this was the first time, just remember, I saw actual Russian soldiers because they were still there. They just had to leave then after the reunification, but this does not happen from today to tomorrow. This took some time. And also East German money and these kind of things. But again, this was all after the formal reunification, so I never experienced Berlin or East Germany before the reunification.
Okay. And now after the Air Force, you moved into pharmaceutical industry. How did that transition come about?
Yeah, first after the Air Force, I went into the Munich University Clinic as physician, as really practicing physician. And this was outpatients and inpatients, focus on internal medicine, rheumatology, inflammation. It was a little bit of a specialty department also for cardiovascular diseases and chronic polyarthritis. That's how it was called at that time. Was also a very interesting time. But as I said, it was never something which I did with the biggest excitement, especially again as a young physician. You are quite challenged if you feel you do not know enough, you are not trained well enough. I had to do night shifts, I had to do weekend shifts where I was the only physician in the whole house. And you feel quite challenged if there is something really serious going on. If you needed a laboratory result to make a diagnosis at night, you had to call the laboratory technician at home. You can imagine that this person was not very happy that you called her or him. Same with an X-ray. If you need an X-ray for pneumonia or anything in the lung or even something in the bone or something in the head, you want to have an X-ray, you also had to call the radiologist. And then the radiologist, of course, was not very happy that she or he had to come home from home into the hospital in the middle of the night or on Sunday morning. It was a little bit... How to say? We called it Lambarene. What is Lambarene? Lambarene was a village where Albert Schweitzer, who later got the Peace Nobel Prize, created in Africa, in Gabon, and the village name was Lambarene, created, so to say, a bush hospital. With basically no equipment, whatever you can get in the African bush in Gabon. So we called our hospital Lambarene because we didn't have any equipment, no technology, no laboratory, no X-ray. And during the daytime, we had all the technology which you needed, but during the nighttime, there was none. And this was intentionally by the head of the hospital, by the good old professor, that you need to be able to diagnose a disease just with the equipment which you have on your hand. Your brain, your eyes, your ears, your stethoscope, that's the only technology you can use. Blood pressure measurement, this kind of stuff. If you really need more, then you have to be very sure that it is so urgent that it cannot wait this 6 or 8 hours until the next morning. But normally, 90% of diseases you can diagnose just using your brain and your skills listening to the patient and examining the patient. And the professor said, and I want you to be good doctors by yourself and not dependent on technology for diagnosis for which you do not actually need the technology. So it was a very good learning experience, but I was not 100% happy with it, I have to say. And this was basically one of several reasons why I changed to the pharmaceutical industry, to use the knowledge and the technology and the science and biology and biochemistry more in a research function and a little bit less in a physician's function.
Yes, because I can see that being stressful in your previous position. But now you've worked for big companies like Merck and Forest Laboratories. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in those early days of your pharmaceutical career?
Yeah, this was a huge change coming from a German hospital to an American corporation. The organization, the structure, the organization chart, the hierarchy, also the way of communicating and respecting, despite I grew up also in the German army, but I would say the hierarchy in an American corporation, at least at that time, needed to be fully respected. not only on a personal level, but also on who gets which information or who needs which information, whom to inform about what. Whatever happened in the hospital, just intuitively. Physicians were all somehow our friends. We all were nice colleagues. We talked to each other. We exchanged our experiences with the patients. We asked other colleagues for their advice. So I had the feeling that in an American corporation, I need to follow specific communication rules. Who makes decisions? Who has to know about situations, who has to be warned if there is a safety risk. It is perhaps also coming from the business itself, pharmaceutical business. Drug development has an inherent risk and potential safety problems. Number one is really the safety of the patients. The avoidance of negative side effects, the importance of a positive risk-benefit value, so that the drug does more good than bad. And this kind of was lived also in the organizational structure of this company at that time. Today it may be much more different. Obviously, this is more than 20 years ago. But at that time, it was a huge difference between the structures and the working style in a hospital versus the structures, the organization chart, and the hierarchy in an American business world.
Yes. And so these were more American-based companies? But were you working in Germany still, or did you end up making your way over to the U.S.?
Yeah, I started in the German subsidiary of Merck, and just to avoid confusion, there's a German Merck and an American Merck. They were one company until the beginning of World War I, and then they had to separate into a German part and an American part. And the German Merck is also still Merck, and the American Merck is in America or outside Germany, also called Merck. But in order to avoid duplications, they cannot use the name Merck in Germany. They abbreviate it into an acronym and call it MSD, which is also called Merck Sharp and Dome, but at least they do not spell out the Merck. So yeah, I started in a German subsidiary of the American Merck, and then later moved to the American headquarters in New Jersey.
And around what year was that you moved?
Oh my God, 2005 or so. Yes, okay. I think. I'm kind of hesitating because I was there for 1.5 years earlier, also on a temporary assignment. And then apparently they wanted to have me back. So I went over there then for good in 2005.
And was that your first time in the U.S.? Or had you visited before?
I had visited the U.S. before, because if you work for an international company, even in a German subsidiary, from time to time, you have to visit headquarters. I had trainings there, I had meetings there, so I was certainly, I think, at least once a year for visit, for business, for meetings, for trainings, for courses, seminars in the United States. Yeah, I was already relatively familiar, at least based on my short-term trips, with the life in the US.
Yes. And then you were also a chief medical officer at, I think it's
TriNetX. Yeah.
TriNetX.
Yeah. It's funny. Even I did not know how to pronounce this name of this company until the day I had my interview there. I went to the doorman or whatever the title of the person is who sits in the entrance of the building where you have to register. And I said, I'm here for an interview. The company called TriNetX. Okay, now I know it's TriNetX.
Yes.
So this was a sidestep from the drug development in the pharmaceutical industry to the so-called real-world evidence, which also later made me write this book, because we had here in the US the 21st Century Cures Act, which focused on improvement of medicine and improvement of drug development and giving the FDA more tools to do their job. And one of the biggest, at least for us, biggest part of this act was the introduction of electronic medical records. So healthcare providers had to move away from paper-based files to electronic files. And if these data were categorized or coded by something, for example, what's called ICD-10 codes for diagnosis, or there were values like laboratory values, or were also coded for medications. So you had basically in electronic form almost everything what you need to describe populations. Their demography, their age, what diagnosis they have, what treatment they have, what laboratories they have, what symptoms they have. So you could do a lot of research with these masses of data. What is important, obviously, is that data privacy is absolutely secured because medical research is only interested in researching populations, not individual people. So let's look at 1,000 people with diabetes in the age of over 65 who are taking metformin and have limited renal function or something. So in medical research, nobody's interested in the individual person. Nobody's interested in the individual person's data, just in population. Therefore, this research can be done in anonymized and aggregated way. Aggregated means we look at the statistics of the population, average, standard deviation, and this kind of stuff. And also there is the code called HIPAA, Health Information Portability Act, which regulates data protection specifically in the healthcare sector. Data protection in the healthcare sector is much, much stricter than in the regular business. In the regular business consumer world, companies are interested in your specific individual shopping behavior. If you Google something, if you look at your browser and look at a product or something, then a few minutes later you start already get individualized advertising. So in the consumer business, the companies are interested in your individual behavior. That's why we are a little bit afraid about big data and getting a little bit kind of concerned if it's about data collection. But in the healthcare business, it's completely different, much, much more strict. So first, the law is much more strict. And second, the researchers in the healthcare area are interested in populations, not in individual behavior. So this was my time at TriNetX, where we introduced real-world evidence in medical research, in learning more about diseases, learning more about the safety and the efficacy of drugs, also learning where do we find patients which are needed for clinical trials, clinical studies, before a drug can be approved. Was a very interesting time where I think I could fully exercise my interest in science on the theoretical part. No patients involved anymore.
Yes. But just looking at your career, you have moved between clinical operations and regulatory affairs. What has been your your driving force behind your decision to work across such diverse aspects of the medical field?
Yeah, it is. I think it's important that you have experience with various functions. It is what I call, one thing is what you are doing, and the other thing is how you are doing. So the one is the knowledge. You can be an expert in oncology, an expert in immunology, an expert in various diseases, neurology. So that's the what you have experienced and what you are doing. If it's in theory, meaning you do not see patients, you do not diagnose and treat patients, but it's just in theory, you can learn that within a few weekends. You lock yourself into your wonderful library with a book and you learn about oncology and the newest findings in science. So that's a theoretical knowledge. That's the what. The other thing is the how. That's medical service. That is communication. This is statistics. This is how are you doing your job. And this is something which is more your skills. And this is something which you should have experienced across your career. So if you can be a good oncologist, but if you were only treating patients or only sitting in the laboratory and doing microscopy or other kind of laboratory tests, you may be a super duper expert and most likely wanted by many, many pharmaceutical companies as an expert. But I think it is also necessary that you have that you have experienced many other ways of doing your job, how to make decisions, how to set priorities, how to manage your projects, how to communicate in case you have a problem with a product, how to communicate it with the press, how open to be with the patients or with the customers. So these are things which you cannot really learn in a library. These are things which you have to experience. And during the time, obviously, from time to time, you make mistakes, and every mistake is a learning opportunity, and you make the mistake once, perhaps even twice, but not the third time.
Yes. And now just looking at your career working internationally and in the U.S., what brought you to Greenport, New York? Or even just when was the first time you had visited Eastern Long Island?
So I moved basically, since I came to the United States, I moved step by step, a step eastwards. I started in New Jersey. From there, I moved to Manhattan. First, also, even within New Jersey, I moved from Somerville, New Jersey to Jersey City, New Jersey. This is already a step eastwards. And then to Manhattan. And then to Patchogue in Long Island.
Okay.
And then to Greenport. So now, I mean, there's not too much going eastwards anymore, Marion or Orient Point.
Yes.
So let's see what happens. No, seriously, the east end of Long Island, especially the North Fork, is really a very, very nice place. Very diverse in terms of what you can do. Whatever interests you can be kind of covered. Whether it's fishing or maritime life or history or winery. I think the Long Island wineries, they can really very well compete or even win with Sonoma Valley. Yes. So it's amazing. I 20 years ago, when someone said about Long Island wine, was a little bit made fun of. And
Yes.
if you went to a party and brought a bottle of Long Island wine, I think you were disinvited. Now it's completely different. And one can perhaps you should have a winemaker, or perhaps you had a winemaker. I asked a winemaker once, said, come on, let's be honest. 20 years ago, Long Island wine was really not one of the best. And now really you can compete. You're really good. And what is it? Did you finally learn how to make wine? Or is it the global warming that basically the climate now really supports?
The warmer.
It's warmer, it's drier, but it's a good mixture. What is it? And he said, it's both. Okay, it's both. So learning and global warming. So anyway, let's not get stuck too much with the winery, but it's certainly something. But winery, it's art, it's the landscape. You have the little bit more rustic North Shore and a little more flat South Shore. You have Greenport, I think, has just the right size between village and city. A lot of nice restaurants, not a lot of nice boutiques. It's simply the better version of the Hamptons, I would say.
Yes.
And that's why I'm here now. Also for my job, it was very well located because the commute from here to Boston or Cambridge, where my work was in the past 7 or 8 years, is relatively easy. Orient Point ferry and then a little bit of driving. It's certainly also a commutable, not daily, of course, weekend commuting to the Boston area.
And how long have you been in Greenport?
As a permanent residency in the area of 3 years, I visited. 3 years. I visited earlier relatively often because it's just a nice place to be, and many people come just for one day, or just come for a weekend, just to experience Greenport and to be in a different place with kind of a relaxed atmosphere and nice weather. Here it's always a little bit more windy, a little bit more refreshing than in Manhattan, for example, where it's very humid and hot.
Yes.
So it's really a very nice place, and I think Greenport has a lot of future if they manage to allow and support this kind of short-term weekend tourism. I hear from time to time a little bit of a concern. It develops like the Hamptons. Everything is about parties, too much traffic, no parking anymore. But I would say, Greenport, you have to know where you want to go. And the only way to go is forward. You cannot go backwards. You have to go forward, and you have to know, what does this forward mean? And how does it look in 2030, 2035? And of course, you can not allow new hotels, you cannot allow restaurants, you cannot allow businesses, but then you are going backwards. And this is what Greenport needs to know. How can we use this kind of soft, diverse tourism in the best way without creating a lot of damage, but moving forward always creates some change. You have to allow change.
Yes.
And currently, if I compare Greenport now with 3 years ago, this is a very, very short time, but I see already improvement. I see more openness. I see more diversity. I see more opportunities. And it's now important to allow this development without destroying anything. Not easy, but it's possible.
I moved here 3 years ago, too.
You see? Yeah.
So, and I've even noticed change within that time. But also, in 2022, you founded Candid-Advisory Inc. to advise on drug development and clinical research. What motivated this next chapter in your career?
Yeah, this was partially voluntary, partially involuntary. I had to deal with health situation, quite serious health situation, but I did not want to do just 2 years or so for treatment and sabbatical. I wanted to continue to be involved in science, in the topic what I'm doing. I wanted to continuously get the newest scientific results, the newsletters. I wanted to be in contact with people. I did not want to disappear completely from the surface. I wanted to stay in the area as much as I could. Since employment was not an option with the disease, which needed a lot of chemotherapy and a lot of hospital stays, was not an option. So I created this consulting company as a tool to primarily to stay alive, but also to stay in the area where I know a lot. And I didn't want to lose it. I did not want to lose my knowledge, my skills, my contacts, my everything. And also I used this time then to write it down in a book about real-world evidence. So the book's title is Real-World Evidence Unveiled, Navigating the Maze of Modern Misinformation. And it summarizes basically coming from medical research, from real world, from these electronic medical records, which give you a good information about what's true in medicine, how do people experience diseases, how do medications work, what are the long-term effects, and then it moves basically to daily life, where you, like the FDA, needs proof. When the FDA gets a drug and the pharmaceutical company tells you, yeah, this drug works, it's healthy, it's safe. So the FDA also needs proof. Similar in daily life, if someone tells you this or that, or you read something in social media, why would you not ask for proof? Tell me the facts, tell me the data. Where does this come from? And some social media allow whatever it is, 180 characters or 220 characters. This is not enough to describe a relatively complicated situation. For example, here, the economy, inflation, immigration, all these discussions, racism, Gaza war. All these discussions which we have now cannot be described in only 180 characters. So you need more. You need to go to the source. You need to ask, where does this come from? Who said this? Where are the facts? Where are the studies? And of course, this does not work well in social media, and it does not work well within 1 minute. You need a little bit time. But you have to make up your mind by fact-checking, that's the nice word we have these days, fact-checking what is behind that, what facts, what data, what studies are behind that. So don't blindly follow just an ideology, make your own decision based on facts. And this is what I learned in medical research, in dealing with the FDA, but now want to apply also in daily life. When not the FDA needs to check something, you also need to check something when someone tells you something, or you read something, or you see something in cable TV. Don't just simply take an ideologic statement for real. Check it out. Fact check. It takes a day or 2 days even. But who says that you have to react to a social media posting within 20 seconds? Nobody says that. You can take your time until you make up your mind based on facts and data and studies. So I wrote this in a book. So I used this 2 years or whatever it is also to communicate, so to say, with the world what I'm thinking about misinformation, disinformation, and fake news.
Yes. And have you seen that over time just increase the more misinformation? Because would you say back maybe 20, 30 years, you wouldn't have to fact check as much, but with so much more information out there today, and it's easier to be misinformed?
A big role is social media, obviously. Social media, everybody can post everything, even as a pseudonym, meaning even without stating their own name, and get it published to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Nobody fact checks that. Nobody. You can basically. There are a few limits. But most of these limits are kind of then. Most of the limits are defined by the freedom of speech, and this freedom of speech is very, very generous here in the United States. In Germany, it's much more restricted. You can, for example, you cannot use a swastika. You cannot have any doubts that the Holocaust ever happened. This is punishment by law. So there are specific restrictions to the freedom of speech. In America, the freedom of speech is much more freedom, really freedom. So this is possible, but it's not only the social media, it's also the TV, the cable TV. There are also two types, the right wing and the left wing. We all know that. We could even name the stations, MSNBC on one side, CNN, Fox on the other side. So what changed in the past 20 years was the upcoming of the social media, totally uncontrolled, and also the separation of TV stations into two political sides, and the reduction of journalistic integrity. Journalists, meaning, should check the sources, should communicate facts instead of opinions, instead of ideologies. This has disappeared, basically. The journalistic integrity basically does not exist anymore. If you look at the selection of topics in the one or the other TV channel, or also the selection of interview guests, they come from the one political side in the one spectrum, or from the other political side in the other channel, or what the New York Times publishes versus the New York Post publishes. So journalistic integrity has disappeared. So it is now much, much, much easier to get information. Many people even call it infodemic. A lot of information. It's much easier to get information, but it's much more difficult to figure out whether this information is true or not.
And what about AI moving forward, and what information they provide, and whether there's biases within that information? And that could be just in general, or even within the health profession, and how they might use that in the future for doctors or physicians.
Yeah, AI currently is very good in helping research, in helping, when I say how many studies are out there who evaluated cholesterol and heart attack or this kind of stuff. And then I get a list of 10 or 15 big studies. So this kind of shortens the time I have to spend in a library, or I've had to spend in Google Scholar dramatically as a search function. I would currently never, ever copy and paste what AI gives me. I have in the book a wonderful example, which is basically almost ridiculous, how AI can trick you out. I don't want to tell it here because people should buy my book, but AI can trick you out. AI takes their information from existing information. When the existing information is biased, if the existing information always goes into one direction, the AI output will also go into one direction. And the AI models are trained by humans. I don't know who trains it, who programs it, whether these are 20-year-old youngsters or 50-year-old experienced people. I have no idea how these AI models, large language models, are created. But human error or human bias can also impact the output. So it's the data source and it's the programming. And therefore, always a human should supervise what AI is doing. And then the human should make the decision. But the human should never, without any kind of double check, take what AI says. Even in the car industry, cars are now built by robots. But still, at the end of the belt, at the end where the ready-made car comes out, there is a human for a quality check. The same should be also here. Or a pilot switches on autopilot. Does not mean that the pilot can leave the cockpit and have some lunch. No, the pilot has to supervise what the autopilot is doing. And this is the approach which I would recommend to AI. Can be extremely helpful if it's used in a reasonable way. And mainly it's saving time. It's saving time. Like robots in the car industry, they help us with activities which we, from a muscle point of view, from a body point of view, we cannot lift these heavy loads. We cannot weld steel parts into each other. Robots can do that much, much, much better. So AI is now saving us time, thinking time, searching time, and this kind of stuff. But the decision stays with us, stays with the human. Maybe different in 10 years, who knows? But that's what I say today.
Yes. And with your work as a physician and within pharmaceutical, it seems like within those fields, they definitely are, well, you can use AI probably to create a more efficient or better drug for patients in the future. And then doctors could use AI to figure out what the symptoms are possibly for patients that come in. But you're saying that we still, even if that continues to evolve and AI is implemented more, humans should still look at the final and think for themselves, because I think that's another thing that we're losing is the critical thinking part.
Yeah, it needs critical thinking to deal with AI. If you just look at the output, especially the verbal output, what kind of words AI uses. For me, as a non-native English-speaking person, it's sometimes interesting, and I could sometimes also learn a little bit because my way of writing in English is certainly different than what ChatGPT would write. So it could also be interesting, but it is what ChatGPT gives us. This output sounds very authoritative. Is this the correct way? Yeah. Authoritative.
Yes.
Has a lot of authority.
Yes.
The way how ChatGPT speaks.
Yes.
Like the authority. Very well selected words, very well built sentences. That's absolutely perfect. And this, if someone speaks like an authority, of course we are tempted to believe this person, whether it's a person or a computer. It's not only the content which counts, it's also the impression. If someone is very authoritative, and has a body language like a boss or like a high-level military general or whatever the attitude is, then of course the behavior also supports the believing of the content. And the same is with ChatGPT. It comes from AI, so it has to be correct. The sentences are very well written, so it has to be correct. No, sometimes we get tricked out. Coming back to pharma, it's also interesting. The starting of a pharmaceutical new drug is screening molecules. What can a molecule do? Does a molecule connect with an enzyme and inhibit it and this kind of stuff? Of course, AI can screen thousands of molecules within a very, very short time. So this may be indeed an improvement. Or a physician in the emergency room looking at an X-ray. Chest X-ray and looking, is this a pneumonia, is this a lymphoma, is this a sarcoidosis, what are these changes in the X-ray? And the AI may have more experience, may have the experience of tens of thousands X-ray pictures, and the diagnosis may be better than the emergency physician who have perhaps an experience with 500 X-rays and has learned that. But this is also clear if, for example, the AI was trained by a data set which comes from a clinic which is specialized in immunology, then the AI may be tempted or biased to diagnose more often a sarcoidosis, which is an immunologic disease, than another AI which perhaps was trained in a clinic which has a lot of infectiology. If the data set was trained on in an infectiology training, they may perhaps more often diagnose a pneumonia or bronchitis. So even there, it is clear where the data come from may be an opportunity for bias, even in something which is so important like a diagnosis based on an X-ray picture.
Yes. And I had another question more so with your own experience working in, I know you didn't really work in the healthcare within the being a physician over here, but being a physician in Germany. But just even your thoughts on, because they're very different systems, Germany and the US healthcare-wise, was that an adjustment for you moving over here too?
Not really, because the differences are clear. The US have the most expensive healthcare system in the world, if you count it in dollar figures and in percentage of the GDP. If you count it or measure it in terms of what percentage of a gross income does an individual person on average have to spend for healthcare, it's approximately the same. Because here we have private insurance, we have deductibles and copays, and this kind of things. In Germany, it's simple, almost everything is covered, and therefore you pay 15% of your income. So we come to the approximately same 12, 14, 15%. But in the US, it's much more profit-oriented. In Germany, it's more socialized. No system is perfect, absolutely. If someone had in any country found the absolutely perfect healthcare system, which considers in the best way the richness of a country, the need and the demography of the population, then this person most likely would be celebrated with several Nobel Prizes. This is just important. Healthcare it starts already with the simple situation. If you compare the normal economy, the normal consumer business with healthcare. In the normal consumer business, if I want to have a BMW, costs some money, but it's my decision whether I buy the BMW. I have to pay for the BMW, and I will get the benefit of driving this wonderful car. Mm-hmm. No promotion for BMW. Let's call it Audi. Let's call it Jeep. Let's call it GM. Let's call it Ford. Mm-hmm. Let's call it car. Mm-hmm. Okay, but the beneficiary, the payer, and the decision maker are the same people. And that's how free economy works in the free market. In healthcare, it's different. The decision maker is the doctor. Mm-hmm. The beneficiary, the one who has the benefit from this decision, is the patient. And the payer is somehow the healthcare system or the health insurance. So the normal laws of a free market don't apply in the healthcare system. And that's the big issue. So you can socialize it, you can capitalize it. It will always have its flaws. Mm-hmm. What is special in the US, what I also kind of experienced as a patient, on the one hand, horribly expensive treatment, which I fortunately could experience and which kept me alive, was most of it covered by the insurance. But the bureaucracy around this, I could consider unnecessary or even dangerous. Just look at the pre-authorization. So if there is something urgently to be done, and if it's just a computer tomography because of a urgent infection or so, then you have to ask, or the physician has to ask a bureaucrat in the insurance company whether this can be done or not. Of course, it's not whether this can be done or whether this can not be done. It's whether the insurance will pay it or will not pay it. But eventually, it's a decision whether it will be done or will not be done. And based on which criteria, somewhere in an office building, will this decision be made? The pre-authorization is really a dangerous and time-consuming and bureaucratic process in the system, in my opinion. And there are other bureaucracy things, pharmacy benefit managers. Pharmacy benefit It's an interim step between the pharmaceutical company and the pharma, and each interim step makes things slower, more bureaucratic, and more expensive. Perhaps I have never understood what these PBMs actually do. I don't think they add any value in the system. My personal opinion, because I know both systems as a physician and as a patient in Germany, and as a physician, not as a treating physician, but as a physician in general, and especially as a patient with a significant disease in the US. It's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, that you see the same thing, not just within the healthcare, but within the pharmaceutical industry here, and why that's so expensive and for people.
Yeah, one point which one has to accept is that about 50% of all new chemical entities, all new drugs, really new drugs, not the 150th aspirin, but really the new drugs, more than 50% worldwide are developed, researched and developed in the United States. And about 70% of all new drugs globally, worldwide, come to market first in the United States, which means have to go through FDA approval, which means that the US research and development system is working in part also for the rest of the world, is subsidizing research and regulatory activities for many, many other countries. Whether this is enough to justify the high drug prices in the United States is another question. But one has to consider that. If you go to Canada, you can get a drug, whatever it is, for half of the price what you pay here. And then you can say here, yeah, these are the research costs in the United States. But you can also say they charge as much because they can. It is indeed a big question. Is the whole healthcare system, should it be a capitalistic system where profit is the highest priority? Or should it be a system where the benefit of the patient is the highest priority? It sounds a little bit challenging and ideologic, but the questions may not be so easy to answer because you need investors, you need profit to finance the research and the progress. But still, there are ways where you can save a lot of money and processes which are integrated into the system only for profit and not for additional quality. This would be the question. If RFK Jr. would be sit here, I would say, hey, RFK, nice to meet you. Please check every process step in the system. Does this process step primarily add profit or does it primarily add quality? And with this questioning, perhaps one could achieve a lot of improvement in the system.
And even looking at other countries that, I don't know if you would say some of the other, like Canada or Germany, where it's kind of more 50-50 or it's maybe more quality than profit in some ways. But because the U.S. does produce and make a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs, is that more the reason why you think they're not willing to switch? Like, because there are so many examples of other countries that are more socialized in that way.
Yeah. So there are many things which can be discussed. Of course, one can start to negotiate the prices, which is now for, I think, the 10 most prescribed drugs, and only for Medicaid the prices are negotiated and then regulated. One can expand that. The prices for physicians' activities are also regulated and negotiated in Germany. They can apply a factor from 1.8 to 6, which gives them a lot of freedom still to charge. But there is a system which, based on the effort, on the material, on the time, on the diagnosis, on the difficulty, rewards physicians more or less, or so they can charge more or less. So this is what we have also for Medicare, obviously. So there are certainly ways one can interfere, but interfering means regulating. Interfering means that the government takes action. And the United States are very well known for their desire for freedom. So we have it also now. We have one side which is more for freedom and for the responsibility of the individual, talking about vaccine mandates, for example. Yeah, should the individual person decide in the discussion with the physician, should we vaccinate or should we not vaccinate? The other side is more in favor of a more authority role, regulating role, and about more the government taking more an active role in supervising and deciding, which also protects the individual from making mistakes. Both sides have their good arguments, but in the United States, the mentality of the freedom of the individual, the freedom making their own decision, even if this decision is a mistake, is more expressed than in other countries.
Yes. And now, I think we've touched on it a bit, but within your book, your new book, Real-World Evidence Unveiled, what do you hope readers take away from it, especially those who may not be familiar with medical research or data science?
Yeah, this was intention that the book does not only talk about medical research. The methods come from medical research because if I tell the FDA this is a good drug, then I have to prove it. And the proof comes with data, with facts, with clinical trials, with evidence. It applies also to real life. If someone tells me, oh, this is a bad policy, or this is, what example can I take without getting too much politicized? Let's say the open borders created a crime wave in the United States. Then I would ask, okay, prove it to me. Please prove it to me. I will not immediately say all immigrants are criminals. The crime wave, what even is a crime wave? Tell me the numbers and so on. So that's where the book goes. If someone tells you something, and in many cases what people tell you or what social media tells you or what politicians tell you will have consequences in the decision I make when it comes to elections. So the freedom of choosing between one party or the other party is really a great right which we have in the United States. This decision should not be made just by stupidly, blindly following an ideology. This decision, whether I choose this party or this president or that New York City mayor candidate or the other New York City mayor candidate, this decision is a serious decision which I have as a voter. And this decision should be based on facts, on correct information, on data. This should be made on things which I have to check. Can I believe what this patient or what this person says? And this may take a little bit time, indeed.
I think it would take people to adjust to that, even in having conversations with people that they might disagree with, because it's always, or people might not be aware of the facts for that position or whatever data they're talking about, but they're still going to stay with their own party or ideology, which I think is something that we've seen across the country in conversation.
And that's also important if you have a discussion. So what I said first, meaning fact check, look at data, look at the source, you can do that alone. You can sit in front of the computer and ask ChatGPT for sources, not for opinion, but for sources. But another way is also to talk with the other side. And when the other side says something, what we very often do in these discussions, we insist on our opinion. So if you are let's say I wouldn't even say blue or red, let's say the yellow and white side. Now, these are politically innocent colors. If you are the yellow side and I talk with you, then I would insist with the arguments for the white side. So, because white is so good. And I would say, no, yellow is so good because What we should do instead is, I should ask you, so why do you think is the white side or your side so good? If someone says, immigration brings crime rate into the United States, then I would question you and would say, okay, how many? How many immigrants do we have? How many of them are criminals? How many crimes are done by US citizens? How many are done by illegal immigrants? Then, of course, you will not have the numbers immediately present. Of course not. But it forces the discussion going into a different way. So instead of insisting that my position is the correct position, I start to question, why is this position made? Why do you have this position? Why do I have this position? So the dispute goes a different way and goes a little bit more into the fact-checking way and a little bit less into the ideology way.
Yes.
And what I also would say is there is so much discussion these days about danger to democracy. In my opinion, the danger to democracy does not necessarily come from one person or from one political opinion somewhere in Washington. The biggest danger for democracy is when the voters, the people, are not well informed, are not educated, and are blindly and stupidly following an ideology without thinking.
Yes.
And what tyrants want people be stupid. So the best way to avoid a tyrant is to be educated and knowledgeable and check the facts and check what's behind an ideology. Look at the facts, look at the studies, look at the sources. Again, it takes more than half a minute, but the value invested in the time pays off, because then democracy really works. Democracy works only if the voters are educated.
Yes, definitely. And I think lastly, I wanted to just, because I know we touched on it a bit with Greenport and the North Fork, but you mentioned in terms of moving forward for the area here that we need to move forward and not get stuck in the past or think back, and that might involve some changes that might be hard or people might not want to see. But what are your overall hopes for the future of Greenport or the North Fork down the line? What would you hope to see?
Yeah, so one has to define how should the way where Greenport is going, how should this way look? It may be something like soft, diverse tourism. I think it makes a lot of sense. But the term makes a lot of sense is not enough. You need to have, again, the facts, the data behind it. Just as an example, Greenport most likely has a lot of weekend tourists.
Yes.
One would have to study this. How much of the impact on the Greenport economy comes from weekend tourists? How much comes from locals, from residents, or from people who are summer residents? One needs to know that in order to make this statement that Greenport's opportunity is in weekend tourism. The consequence would also be weekend tourism. Okay, they need hotels or they need short-term rentals. So what currently is going on, that one says one has to ban short-term rentals because of the housing crisis for long-term rentals. So what's needed, it is a proof that actually banning short-term rentals will actually open more long-term rentals. These are completely different markets and completely different types of properties.
Yes.
I just don't believe it. Before one does that, one has to know how many short-term rentals are in Greenport. If it's not allowed, how does this impact the hotel prices? Of course, hotels want to make more money. Of course, they are interested in prohibiting a competition. And what would be the impact in the local economy? If short-term rentals are banned, hotel prices will most likely go up. Weekend tourism numbers perhaps may go down. How does this impact the boutiques, the restaurants, the fishing charter boats and all this kind of? There needs to be an economic impact study. So this is what I mean when I say decisions should be made on facts, not on opinions and not on ideologies. And this would be an example for Greenport to really evaluate and look at the data and have economic impact studies before any kind of code changes and other regulatory actions are done.
I think just with the short-term rentals is definitely a topic that is being talked about, but in terms of balancing out the positives and negatives, like you said, whether hotel prices would go up, and maybe if there were more long-term units, there might be people out here more year-round, but you can't really guarantee that because you could have people that might still just have the property and they wouldn't rent it out for short-term rental. So I think it's, like you said, something that needs to be studied, and whether there needs to be regulations in that regard. And then because people do also complain about when people can come out and visit, the hotel prices are already expensive, and just how all of that benefits all the other different industries, from, like you said, the charter boats and other businesses out here that are along the main street and Front Street. But I guess we'll have to see how that develops.
Yeah, I mean, I also cannot have the answers, obviously. I'm also one of those who have an opinion, but the opinions need to be further supported by facts. And even if it's just by questionnaires, sending out, how many do we have here in Greenport? 2,000 residents or so, sending out a questionnaire. Do you even have something which you can rent out on a short-term basis? The next question would be, if this was prohibited, would you then rent it out for long-term rentals? Something like this, to get more data-driven facts than just an opinion. And since we have here only one mayor and 4 trustees, the diversity of opinions is not huge. If you have a city council with 20 or whatever New York City has council members, you have a much, much larger diversity of opinion. In a small organization like Greenport Village, the diversity is really, really limited. This makes it even more important that you support the opinions by data, by facts, by polls, by whatever means you have to give the whole thing a higher grade of evidence.
Yes. And I think we covered everything. Were there any last-minute thoughts or things you'd like to discuss that we haven't touched on? There's probably a lot more. But
we could sit here for hours in this nice library. It's actually, I have to say, with the internet and with Google and so on, One misses the time in a library with a good book, having something in the hand.
Yes.
So people in Greenport really should visit more often this wonderful William Floyd?
Well, Floyd Memorial Library.
Floyd Memorial Library.
Yes.
It smells like a library. It looks like a library. People are nice. So yeah, I would love to come back to another series of your podcast for other topics.
Yes.
If we continued now what we could, I think our listeners
They might
we would reach the limit of their attention span.
Yes, that's a whole nother topic. No, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story and career. It's really interesting to talk about. And also we have your book, which can be checked out in the library, but definitely come in and check it out. It's nice talking to you today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was really a pleasure. I did not even look at the time, so I don't have the feeling that we went over time because everything was really very, very interesting. Hopefully for the listeners, it's the same feeling. And the book is available here for reading in the library. Also, the bookstore in Front Street also has it for sale. And then, of course, Amazon. Yeah, Amazon has it. Ebook, paperback, hardcover. And the name is Real-World Evidence Unveiled. A little bit of promotion should be allowed. So thank you very much. It was really, really a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 189 with Dr. Manfred Stapff. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.